I'm going to be responding to the claim that worldwide pesticide use is damaging the ecosystem. And the advocates' secondary claims were: one, that pesticides damage agricultural land by killing honeybees and beneficial insects. Number two, pesticide contamination reduces our drinking water supply. And three, pesticides are hazardous to farm workers. So in response to the main claim that pesticide use is damaging the ecosystem, there really isn't much controversy here. Pesticides, by definition, are poisons designed to kill living organisms. So the pesticide manufacturers, like Bayer, they merely make the value claim that the benefits to humans outweigh the risks to the environment. So instead of making a value argument, I'm going to just refute the secondary claims. So the first supporting claim is that pesticides damage agricultural land by killing honeybees and beneficial insects. The advocate presents insufficient evidence to support this claim. The advocate reasons and assumes that pesticides to be the cause of declining bee populations. She infers that bee populations may completely die out, and as a result, crops will die without pollination. So pesticides damage the agricultural ecosystem by destroying pollinators. And she uses and cites the Fish and Wildlife Service's website as evidence. So in looking at this, I believe the advocate incorrectly identified pesticides as the cause of bee collapse. She makes a sweeping generalization by overlooking other likely causes. On the Fish and Wildlife Service's website, it actually identifies habitat loss as the primary cause of bee declines. And a more detailed analysis by the EPA in their report, Pollinator Health Concerns, attributes the declines to complex interactions among multiple stressors. Those are pests that attack the bees, pathogens and viruses, poor nutrition, bee management practices, and a lack of genetic diversity. In another report from the USDA, 2012 National Stakeholders Conference on Honeybee Health, Dr. Reed Johnson from Ohio State University and Dr. James Fraser from Penn State University presented that it's not clear, based on current research, that pesticides play a major factor in the decline of honeybee health. So pesticides are one of the factors impacting bees, but a causal relationship does not exist. Now, in the second claim, that pesticide contamination is reducing our drinking water supply, the advocate presents statistics from EPA's 2000 National Water Quality Inventory, and she claims that 40% of rivers and 45% of lakes are impaired. She also uses statistics from the USGS, which claims 90% of streams and 50% of wells test positive for pesticides. These are the facts, and these are good sources of evidence. But the advocate proves a different point than the one that's being disputed. She specifically claims that drinking water supply is reduced by pesticides. But the evidence only proves that fish are exposed to pesticides in streams. The EPA's report, which she cited, only tested 19% of all streams and rivers. And of those, only 14% were impaired for drinking water. That's only 2.6% of the total. And pesticides are not listed as the cause of impairment. Bacteria and silt are the top two reasons. In the second report, the USGS report, they primarily concluded that pesticides are widespread in streams and many are at high enough concentrations to potentially affect aquatic life. But they reassure that the drinking water supply is safe. The report clearly states that concentrations of pesticides in streams and groundwater were usually lower than human health benchmarks, and none of the streams tested were used as drinking water. Well water rarely exceeded human health benchmarks. So the evidence shows that our drinking water is safe. In response to the third claim, and that's that pesticides are hazardous to farm workers, she asserts that 90% of farm workers experience toxic effects from pesticides. The advocate does not provide sufficient evidence to support this claim. The primary evidence is the study Unsafe Use of Pesticides and its impact on health of farmers, and it's a case study in Bangladesh. The advocate makes a hasty generalization by taking unsafe pesticide use by untrained farmers in a small part of Bangladesh and assumes them to represent all farmers. I claim that pesticide poisoning of any type does not appear to be a major problem in the U.S. The 2012 annual report of the American Association of Poison Control Centers, published last year, has a table at the end, Table 22A, and it shows all nationwide healthcare cases involving any form of pesticide poisoning, consumers or farmers. And they only had 118 major problems and only 6 deaths. All the rest were minor or no problems at all. So pesticide poisoning does occur, but not at a severe rate. So in conclusion, I've shown that pesticides are not the cause of honeybee declines. Our drinking water is safe and not impacted by pesticides. And pesticide poisoning is not widespread in farmers or consumers. Thank you.
All right, Jim, everything is easy to follow. You lay out the primary claim and the secondary claims at the beginning. You basically dismiss the notion of responding to a value issue that you see there and focus instead on the secondary issues, which I think is fine. You've got a good cause-effect argument on the first point concerning the bees. It seemed to me a little bit like the evidence might have worked better in the opposite direction if you'd started with that second piece of evidence that says it's not clear that it has anything to do with pesticides, and then follow up with the other evidence that says here it's really a very complex relationship and here are all these other things that are going on. I think that might make that argument a little bit stronger instead of going the other direction. The transition to the second point was very clear, like I said, again, it's easy to follow. The discussion of the water and the number of streams that have been contaminated is okay. I do think that you need to kind of emphasize a little bit more, although it ultimately comes out that that's the point that you're making, that says none of the pesticide levels has been shown to be harmful to humans and only to aquatic life, and even that it's relatively a small percentage that it's a threat to aquatic life. That's kind of the summary of what your argument is. All of the evidence clarifies that argument, but I think that you need to have kind of a clearer declarative statement that says that. I mean, I can tell that that's what the argument is, but you're sort of letting the evidence make the argument for you a little bit more than having your own declarative statements on those points. But again, I thought that it was very well developed, and you have very good evidence on that. The third point, I think you challenged the basis for the inference that the advocate's presenting because their research is based on a unique situation, circumstance in another place. I remember hearing the title of the publication, and I think I would have jumped on that immediately if I was responding. All right, remember, the title of this study is The Unsafe Use of Pesticides in This Particular Situation. In other words, everybody is acknowledging that the people who used it in an unsafe way. That's not the way most people use the pesticides, that somebody who's untrained, uses it in an improper way, gets negatively affected by that. That's a terrible tragedy for them, but that's not the basis for which we should be generalizing. I thought you explained that pretty effectively. You try to minimize it a little bit with the poison control information. I thought that was pretty solid. 6 deaths sounds like a lot, but we don't really know what the circumstances of those 6 deaths in the United States were. But it certainly doesn't sound like long-term poisoning that comes from exposure to the chemicals by farm workers who are picking the plants or whatever it is, whatever their exposure level comes from. It sounds like they had 118 incidents. That might be a spill, accidental ingestion. Somebody got oversprayed, for instance. There were people working in the field when the plane flew over and dropped pesticides on people, something like that, and then there were some problems. But it's not really a widespread exposure. I thought you did a pretty good job kind of diminishing that claim there. All right, thank you.